All right. Welcome to another episode of the Side Note Podcast, a podcast dedicated to electronic music and all things related. I am your host, Nick, and today we have with me sound healer Torkom Ji. Welcome, sir.
Hey,
Thank
Nick.
you for making the time.
Thanks for having me. I'm super grateful to be here with everyone.
100%. So I think this podcast, the primary focus is underground electronic dance music, i.e. rave. But I think sort of adjacent to that, you kind of have your spiritual kind of burner, new age kind of wellness culture. And there's definitely, we were talking about this before, there's definitely kind of a Venn diagram where those two planets kind of collide. And I would very much like for, this program specifically to kind of exist at that intersection in the way that much of burner culture exists today. So with that, it is my pleasure to bring you on here. I think you are firmly more kind of on the wellness end of that spectrum. And I had the pleasure of first seeing you perform at the Wisdom in downtown Los Angeles. For those of you who haven't been or haven't heard of it, please look into it. It is a phenomenal experience. I think they're reopening in September. And they are essentially kind of, a Burning Man tent built right in the middle of LA. And so I got to see Torkom play. I had, what could only be described as a mystical experience, seeing him perform, perhaps with or without the assistance of third-party psychedelia. But yeah, man, so thank you again for being on here.
That's awesome. And thanks for having me. I always love hearing stories because you never know in the moment what's really happening with people, but you always assume, some people are enjoying it, some people are walking out, some people are entering the room. But when you hear something like, hey, that set or that experience, changed me in a way or put me in a certain space, it's actually like exactly why I do what I do is so people have an experience, a positive experience of some sort, because that's what motivated me. So,
right. And I think we were talking before we started rolling as well that I think for me, part of what made it so special is, you are very much a sound healer. And I think coming into it, my perception of what a sound bath was it's just the gongs and the singing bowls and everything's very quiet and, very zen and yoga. And your performance or your methodology is much different. I mean, it feels very much kind of like a live PA electronic music performance, married to kind of what is a spiritual experience and kind of that vibration of, healing and wellness.
Yeah, man, it's a whole arc and like a whole history and origin story with how I got into the synths and like what that meant for me at that time in my life and what it became. But my origins are in electronic music production. I was on Reason 3 and 4 like, 14, 15 years ago, early 20s, late teens, just figuring out just the basics, like how to layer just fundamental sounds, right? And I used to play guitar in middle school, so I had some kind of musical background. But I've been doing now what we're calling like sound healing or sound bath stuff. It's going on 10 years. I'm celebrating, which is really, it's insane how fast that flew by. But a lot also happened in those 10 years. And when I got into it, I actually didn't even know that there was a sound bath culture, if you will. I'm from LA. I was in that whole like LA rave scene we were talking about the late 2008, 9,
right,
early teens, yeah. Right? Like the Together as One, Monster Massive.
Yeah, EDC back when it was at the LA Coliseum.
Anyone who was there at that time remembers just the level of like international musicianship that was being brought in and the amount of energy and chaos and like fun really that happened there. And so right after that period, it kind of set me into a trajectory where I was super interested in things like, okay, I need to go to Burning Man now as like a mecca, right? Oh, I need to explore alternative future lifestyle.
So did you do all of that?
Myself.
Did you go to Burning Man?
Yeah, basically 2010, I went to Burning Man.
Okay.
And this was like after the 2-3 years of those raves in LA. And I was like, oh, I'm ready to go do a Burning Man thing. And a lot happened in that first Burning Man. It was incredible. I like learned what a chakra was. That sounds kind of like cheesy today. It's like so basic, you know. But at the time I was like 22 and I'd never heard of a chakra, and it was a really cool installation. You had to like verbalize each tone and read about them. I like knocked out in there. I woke up 2 hours later. It was really relaxing, like shaded tent. And I just felt like stuff was happening to me. I had been working with synths for a few years, and I self-taught myself how to use synths and MIDI. And I used to play for friends and stuff late night. They'd be like, dude, we got to go. And like, they would lie down basically, and like I'd play for them in the dark. But at Burning Man, this kind of transformation happened, and in the sense that when I got back, I didn't want to really eat meat. I started meditating a lot, and I wanted to just switch things up. So I lived in Iowa for 2 years after.
Oh, wow.
At like a meditation university. Yeah, I just left here. There's a university, it's in Iowa. It's the Beatles yogi founded it in the 70s. And they basically have like a huge concentration of meditators. It's a vegetarian campus. They teach yogic arts, meditation, Vedic science. It's really incredible. And while I was there, I created Quantum Harmonix. So
that's the name of your company.
I call it Quantum Harmonix. Okay. It's a system, right? And over time, I've acknowledged that. Like, it's just like Bruce Lee had Jeet Kune Do, right? This is my Quantum Harmonix, and it's currently I'm the only practitioner. I kind of consider it like a science because it has rules, it has a consistency, it has a framework. Right. And when I plug in, I apply all those things, it does what it should, right? Consistently. So in the sense, it's kind of like it's its own thing.
Well, I mean, I can certainly attest to having an experience with it. I guess, could you talk about what the underlying kind of thesis of how it works is, and kind of the methodology?
Yeah. So this meditation school, right? They tell you, start this meditation. This is what it does. This is the scientific research that we have that shows what it literally does to your brain, like physically. They basically, like, they give you all this Kool-Aid that you drink. And a lot of it's out there. Like, fires don't come near the town, and tornadoes go around the town, and this like coherence effect, you know, meditating lowers crime in neighborhoods if a certain amount of population meditates. They even have research that has demonstrated this. Like, they sent people into Kosovo, and then a few weeks later or a month later, the whole conflict ended.
Wow.
So, and they even have people in the military from this organization that are like military officers that are also members of this meditation movement that train and create like meditative soldiers.
Wow.
That just like go areas and meditate and like teach people how to meditate.
Wow.
And
so
that's like weaponized meditation.
Wow. That's part of like their military campaign.
Like, people don't know this, but like that's the part of militaries, certain militaries, the US military being one. I can attest to this because the guy who taught me meditation there, my teacher, was like a officer, or he was like, he was definitely not, you know, he was like a 65-year-old gentleman who I think had been in the military for 35 or 40 years, was pretty decorated, and was also part of the TM movement. And by the way, was their liaison to the U.S. government, where he was implementing programs for, you know, things like Kosovo and other.
Okay, so this is like the meditation version of MK Ultra.
It's really, really really fascinating stuff. But being there, right, in this town, where half the town they're called townies. They're like just your run of the mill Iowans who like are like, what is this weird meditation shit? It makes for a really interesting, palatable field of creative, like coherent energy. That sounds like hogwash or just threw a bunch of buzzwords. It's like when you go there, you feel it, right? You close your eyes, you start meditating, you start getting all kinds of insight, like perspectives, motivation, almost from like thin air, from nowhere. And it's constantly bombarding you. So when I came back to LA, it was almost like I can feel myself being reconditioned around the city, right? But I immediately plugged in with what I was doing. While I was there, a lot of my friends were like leading like DMT ceremonies and things like that, right? So one night I was like, hey, can I just bring my synth and play sounds while you guys do your thing? And it was such a success. Everyone was like, dude, those sounds were like a vehicle for our transportation, right? So the last 6 months I spent out there in this really enriching environment is where I created a consistent weekly sound meditation experience. And it was just for me, like, we all meditate. We live in a meditative community. I've been making these more ambient, synthy, droney things that when I'm in a meditative state, they just go deeper. Like after 10 minutes, it just starts to go into a deeper dimension. And then when I found that out, like, it's not about doing it logically and sitting and trying to mimic how those sounds are made and get it. It's more like just doing it for 15 minutes and then you drop in, right? And anyone who messes with synths kind of knows what I'm talking about. When you're just fooling around, you get in this flow. So it's through that flow that I learned, like, wow, I can just really calm myself, and then this whole system of movement and mechanics and layering can kind of just emerge, and then people have an experience from that. When I came back to LA, I just started doing it at festivals, like yoga festivals, Bhakti Fest, etc. And I never looked back. It kind of immediately was received. People were telling me that it was helping them with stuff that I never even thought that it could. And I just did not go back to Iowa. I didn't finish the schooling. I was like, okay, it's time to take this. And I kind of like forged my path right there.
So, but I guess in terms of, you know, you're coming up with sounds to pump through your synths. How do you know kind of which sounds work, which frequencies work? Is this sort of, you know, I see kind of videos and articles out there about how, like, oh, you know, the 26 hertz or whatever is the God kind of frequency. So are there research papers or something that they were giving you to kind of indicate these are the frequencies you should be working within, or was it a trial and error process?
When I started this, I was like coming across a lot of frequency stuff, frequencyism, 528 this, 428 that, DNA repair this, liberation of guilt that, right? And so it was fascinating to me. I was like, how does this translate to what I'm doing with electronic music or synthesizers, or my ability to generate, you know, a synth frequency oscillation that plays off of some of this information, right? And in the pursuit of doing that, I adopted a lot of what I think a lot of people fall into, which is a trap. This whole school of frequencyism, we'll call it. Okay. I just already mentioned that, but there's no other way. I see those
videos on YouTube all the time, like, oh, this is the DMT frequency, this is the God frequency.
Basically, where I'm at now, after like 10 years of learning, researching, blah, 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 like, it's a less is more approach for me.
Okay.
Actually isn't a whole field of study of, you know, where light and frequency and sound collide with like universal principles of the universe, in which once played unlocks some kind of value within all of us equal. It doesn't work that way. And the reason is because, first of all, everyone's different. What lifts you might not lift someone else, right? Or what affects someone may affect someone else in a different way. And we're all we're physically like our size is different. Our whole reaction to how we experience sound is unique to our own self. And there's no indication, or there's no reason to believe that any specific frequency, especially one that ends like on such whole numbers, like 528.00 hertz, exactly that.
Yeah, and why not 0.06?
Nature's chaotic. So actually the old tuning systems would have accommodated, you know, they would have been more like, they didn't use equal temperament, first of all. So all the notes were not equally spaced. And because of that reason, your D would have been, you know, let's say like 217.63 hertz. And your C would have been, they would have varying amounts of space between them. And that would be tuned around either the ear or around more natural principles, things that made sense for how they were using it. And in many ways, they were more connected to what was clean and resonant with their instruments of the time, right? Whereas today, we're a little bit disconnected because we just tune everything to a standard tuning. It's all equally tempered. We don't have to worry about it, and everyone can play together. But in doing so, you lose a lot of what we would call this natural tuning, Pythagorean tuning, or just intonation.
Okay.
With that said, electronic music is equally tempered. The sharps and flats, the 13 notes, all of it, right? The 7 whole tones and the sharps and flats. So it's a good way for us to agree upon a musical body and a system that we make music.
Or it's like a language that's agreed upon.
Correct. But if you want to have something like, let's say, chimes, where each chime is tuned, you wouldn't want to equally temper them. You would want to tune them to something like Pythagorean tuning, because you're not playing them musically and structuring
So I guess
them.
what does that mean? I don't know what that means. Pythagorean tuning.
Well, Pythagoras, right, was a
Right.
mathematician.
Yep.
And he was also he was a great mind. He's responsible for a lot of theorems.
Or a squared plus b squared equals c squared.
Correct,
Yeah.
but also some of his biggest contributions are he started to like cognize and bring together and speak to the ideas of his time, of how this relationship between sound and space and mathematics, proportion, the stars, the heavens, the organs, and he had a lot of life experiences that led him to these places. Like, for example, and we're just kind of riffing right now, but it plays in. When he was young, he noticed that the blacksmith would be hitting an anvil, and the different base, different sized base of the anvil would generate either a low or high frequency based off the size of the base, right?
Okay.
So a really, really small one would be a high pitch frequency, but a really, really big wide base would have a deeper clank. And he said, wow, he understood this correlation between size and pitch. And kind of like if you have a really big giant guy and a really, really short person. Right. Like the vocal cords, and just the bone structure, the sound comes from all of these parts. And in the same way, a really, really big person has a larger heart, really like a smaller person has a smaller heart. So this idea that there's a universal heart frequency that affects all hearts,
I see. What
Does
you're
it
saying.
affect different
Okay.
sized hearts? Like,
Got it.
How do you know it's a heart cell versus how's the frequency know it's a heart cell versus not? And then the metaphysical excuse or explanation is no, it's not a physical heart frequency. It's an energetic metaphysical frequency. It's like, okay, so then why is it exactly 528.00 hertz precisely? Wouldn't it be something a little bit more arbitrary that we try to get more and more closer to? And would it be the same value for everyone? Like,
Right.
are different ethnic groups at a different heart? Like how does this work? What are the differentiating factors between are all homo? Is this for cats, dogs, and humans, or is there? Or are chimps are our cousins? So do chimps have a similar heart resonant frequency range? It's
Right.
528. When you start to get like into that level of like where is the science of that? You start to actually see there isn't any, and there's one man responsible for the entire premise of this frequencyism, Leonard Horowitz. I almost had a debate with him about, not a debate actually, it was going to be a discussion about sound healing and frequency stuff. He wanted to question and interrogate me about like what I was going to bring to the table. I said, hey man, like, I'm sorry, but I don't have time. We can share our views on the podcast, and he declined. Yeah, he thought I was like an informant or something crazy, but his contributions are why people like yourself and myself came across all this 528, 965, like the premise that specific frequencies have universal healing properties for all people, right? Comes from him and his book, which he sold a lot of, but it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. There aren't other people advocating for that. And also when you really get down to breaking down what he's speaking to, he's saying that these are ancient frequencies that the Gregorian monks used that, comes from the antiquity that we now know exist, but we didn't even measure cycles per second until there was even a measurement for it, until there was electronic devices, So this idea that there's like ancient frequencies that we can today replicate or produce and like...
Got it. So I guess suffice to say, when you're talking about your quantum harmonic system, this is distinct and unique from what people might be seeing when they're on YouTube and,
The whole gist of it is there's like this mountain of information that you have to like decipher through and decode and get to the bottom of. And what I've learned is it's not an additive process as much as it's a subtractive process. You got to unlearn and undo whatever it is you think you've learned, because the real information that's valuable in this field, we're talking about the field of producing electronic music, being creatively inspired within producing electronic music, right? Being able to produce a range of tones, sounds, and utilizing, if you want to take it to that level, utilizing like esoteric or even metaphysical principles, non-physical principles, or even narrative type, like dynamics in how your sounds affect you or other people. Like there's stuff there. And to get there, you have to work through a lot of misinformation and disinformation, right? And so for me, to tie it back to what you were just asking me about, like how this ties into quantum harmonics doesn't make these claims about specific frequencies for specific things, although I can get to where we know that that does exist, like the 40 hertz range is interesting, right? But as far as like 928 hertz or whatever for heart healing or DNA or this or that, it's my belief that if the music is made well and someone receives like joy out of it, like their DNA is doing what it should be doing, you know what I'm saying? Like their immune system is singing, you know, and it's not going to matter if it was a little bit off in a frequency that somewhere arbitrarily it's saying it should be in order to be healing. With that said, I personally do tune my frequencies. I tune my A to 432. So I use 432A, which means more or less like you take all of the notes and you just slightly lower them down, like a smidge.
Okay.
And I do that as a preference because I like that nature of that lower tone kind of quality. Kind of like if a guitarist tunes down. Metal bands do this a lot. They tune down to drop D or something, drop C.
Got it.
So that's the extent of why I tune my frequencies to specific frequency range, and I don't use the default 440 hertz. But I do have to say, in the past, I was a little bit more like 432 hertz is the only way. It's like the healing way. It was almost like I was also maybe a little bit militant about it. Until I just had to develop and learn more about like what's actually happening there. And it's not to take away from what I think a lot of what people are trying to say about 432 hertz music. And for those people who don't know, as I mentioned, like if you're not a music person, it's maybe a hard concept to grasp with, but like all music is, we agree to what pitch it's in. So when you buy like a piano or a guitar tuner and you're going to tune your guitar, like there's an agreed upon standard. But in the past, people had their own standards.
Right.
Right. So in a sense, what I'm trying to do is explore like breaking out of that agreed upon standard.
Right.
And I've found a like tonal pitch, like a field that I like, and it's 432A, right?
Got it.
But that's not what makes Quantum Harmonix. It's really about a few different elements working at play there, right?
Because you have, don't you have like a subwoofer jacket that you put on people as well, or?
Yeah, it's called a sub pack. It's a haptic device,
okay.
And I've been working with them for a few years actually, like as an artist, brand rep / like I produce events. We'll have a bunch of their devices come through where people will have shared group experiences, right? And through adding on like the haptic vest, basically it adds that physical sensation. And it carries a certain range of the low end bass frequency, like anywhere from 5 to 235 hertz goes to the sub pack. Everything else goes to the headphones. So in a sense, you're like a cocoon of sound, and that's incredible how that could make you feel.
Yeah. So I think you had a booth at. Were you at the last Mayan Warrior event here in LA in 2019?
No, I wasn't there.
Okay.
Was there like a sub pack booth? Or?
There was a sub pack booth there.
Oh, cool.
And I remember it subjectively felt very similar to what I experienced when I saw your show at the Domes. It was, to me, like very much kind of similar to experiences I had with, say, like a DMT or like 5-MeO, and to me it was very interesting how similar it can feel and be a completely different sort of modality.
I mean, anyone who's been to a rave or gone to like an electronic music show or any of that stuff, they know the power of the music, the vibe, the chemistry, right? All of it works in a way that creates a unique experience that's like a peak euphoria and just makes you think about your own self and life in different ways, right? And we understand this, like that's why people are attracted. And this includes, it's incredible, but electronic music culture is comprised of PhDs and doctors and lawyers and tech people, and in some cases, people who may become politicians. There's a whole range of people who have had experiences through what this scene is about. And ultimately, if music can have this effect where it can elicit such a transformative quality in people, it's something that we should explore, right? And it's something that the scene can teach us. What could we extrapolate from what's happening here, as far as like, why are people going to these events? Why do they seek to go to them? What do they get from it? And culturally, as a ritual, what is it either filling the void of or replacing or seeking to connect with? And I think those are all valid, like very, very valid pursuits, specifically for like our generations. And also a big thing I'm trying to, like, that I believe in, that music can do, and especially like what I'm trying to do with my work, is any and all times where you can't necessarily access those things, like an electronic music event with people, you could still have an experience in your own room or in your neighborhood studio or something. It's about making like those experiences that you would only find at festivals accessible elsewhere. That's a big part of what I've decided that I think is the right step for me to do. And what does it look like to take, a synth trippy, like hour, like journey format with people lying down and their eyes closed, and take it out of a, festival dome or tent and put it into a corporate wellness room where the HR person, sent an email out to everyone and said, "Hey guys, stay after for this thing." And and they show up and they're like doing the same exact thing in the same exact format. And it's really, really interesting to do, because on one hand, you have people who at electronic music events who are totally down and open and they know the drill. And in many cases, even if they don't, they're just like, oh, it just feels good, I'm down, and they kind of let go. But in this corporate environment, people are skeptical and curious.
Actually,
and
do you have a lot of experience kind of applying this in a corporate environment? Because I would love to hear kind of the difference in response.
It was kind of a cool like awakening for me to be like, wow, I could actually do this for a corporation, that international corporation with thousands of employees, that where only 30 or 40 of them will experience it. But those are the people who need it, right? And so I've worked with some I don't want to name drop, but like some really, really awesome large companies, and who are down for this. It's amazing to see people who come in and they're like uncomfortable about the idea that they're going to lie down, close their eyes, go inside and do it with other people, especially their coworkers. But after the event or the experience, when you hear their like emails or their questionnaires or just what they say to you after the event, it's like amazing. You hear things like, wow, I almost didn't stay. Like I wanted to leave halfway through, or I didn't think I'd like this, or I thought it was going to be weird, but that was so nice. When's the next one? Like, how could I do more of this? And that's amazing, because you're teaching them how that they can access. Ultimately, what they just did is they accessed themselves. And I kind of tricked them into making them think that it's about like the format and the sound and the whole thing, and it's being something that's being done to them. But when you're done with it, it's like, it's not about any of those things. It's about like you just actually connected with yourself,
right,
in a really deep way.
So when people are initially resistant to it, what is it about? What are they resistant to? Do you think it's the idea of introspection? Is it the fact that they're getting kind of, hooked up to machinery? Both. I mean, because I would say that I tend to think that kind of the vast majority of people out there are sort of resistant to going into themselves, and there's some sort of fear about, like sitting with their own thoughts. Do you think it's that, or do you think it's something else?
I feel like it's, in many ways, it's cultural. Our culture, especially in the cities, is so like go, 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 do. And then our forms of leisure are like just like numb out.
Talk about your spirituality a little bit. Because I think in order to kind of do what you do and to have the understanding that you do, of how what you do works with the human body, I think there does need to be kind of a spiritual understanding. And I guess how did that develop for you? Because you mentioned, going to Burning Man and coming back and feeling, inclined to like clean up your diet and stuff. And that's typically kind of a symptom, if you will, of spiritual awakening. So did it start at Burning Man, or was it before, or was it kind of, at the meditation school?
So, like I said, like my late teens, I got a synth, right? So my first job was a subway job, and I quit after 2 months, and I just took all my money and bought a MIDI synth.
Okay.
And a year later, I was rocking it. And I remember I used to just play in my room, and like so many emotions would fill, and I would even start to like tear while I was playing, and I would almost like see images of past musicians and composers, and this idea that like I was stepping into a legacy of a continuity factor of like what this art is about, and it was choosing me and I was choosing it. So can you remind me your question one more time? I'm so sorry.
I guess just in terms of, you know, your trajectory in terms of
my spirituality. So that was really the first time, like when I would be playing in my room and I would start to feel those emotions, and like I would feel presence, almost like an energy. And I would say it kind of started there, because it was the first time I acknowledged that when I'm playing on my own, I wasn't feeling alone. So that was a nudge in a direction for sure. Fast forward 2-3 years, I went to Burning Man, maybe 3 or 4 years later, and I'm still producing electronic music at this point, obviously. But after that experience, this voice kind of came back, this kind of presence, very feminine, very gentle, and just reminding me like, and this is kind of strange to think in this way, but I mean, I know how my mind thinks and like what things I think about. And it was overwhelmingly bringing in themes of like, bring love back, love your friends, love your family, be compassionate, like extra, like focus here on extra, like overdrive. And I was like, oh, okay, you know, I'll do that. And just through that guidance and listening and whatever, I just ended up receiving downloads and doing my meditation, doing my sounds, and just learning and creating this whole loop in which was reinforced by that same voice saying like, good, now do a group event. Good, now do another one.
Interesting.
Good, now start reaching out and doing private sessions.
So you kind of feel like the innate insights kind of, you know, coming from your higher self.
Unlike any other time in my life, between 22 and 24, 25, I would call feminine, angelic presence or voices, and not even in like a schizophrenic way, you know, just more like, you know, when you're waking up and you think you're having a dream, almost like someone was saying something to you in a dream, but you just wake up, so your brain can't really decipher like what's real yet, you know? It's in that subtle space where I would feel this connection, and then it would kind of dissolve. So it led me to believe and lean more into like the metaphysical side of things. Like if there is a dimension or a portal or a space in which, you know, through our subtle awareness and our really, really calm state of awareness, we can like connect with beings or guides or whatever, like it's got to be that really, really thin veil there, that space. And that's the space in which I was having experiences. And then they just stopped, just completely stopped. And as it stopped, is the same time where I took action. I left LA. I went to the school. I started learning things, and I became very almost ultra spiritual, you know, like vegetarian to the max, and almost like I had dreads. So I didn't know to what degree I was almost falling into like an archetypal, like I went to Burning Man.
I'm just becoming a hippie. I'm just becoming a fucking Burning Man hippie.
I smell like patchouli. I have dreads. I'm a vegetarian. Like
I burn Nag Champa at home.
And I totally thought like, this is me and my journey, man, my experience. But like, you know, you zoom out and you're like, wow, that's just, it's like what, like people just kind of like fall into, it's like punk rock, you know? Everyone's so unique and different, but they all have leather jackets and studs and the same hairstyle.
Yeah. Like once you discover kind of a subculture that you resonate with, it's very easy to just sort of like submit your entire personality to that, and
that will happen to you through the Burning Man and the spiritual culture.
Yeah,
you'll try to be more of a metaphysical alien 5D, like you have all the answers type. Or when you become vegetarian, you're all of a sudden like, or vegan even, you're more like, you're the authority on diet and what everyone else should be eating. And there's many reasons why that's the case, and everyone else is wrong. If you take these things too far, everything becomes polarizing. Spirituality, the trap with that is like, you're meditating a lot, you're creating stillness. Everyone won't shut the fuck up. You're better than them because you can.
Well, yeah, because there's still like, ego, right? So
there is, and these things don't directly teach you how to like slay the beast or go after the beast or even love the beast. They more so say like, just keep doing the work, and the master, you know, he said if you just keep doing what he said, like you'll be good, and don't pay attention to that stuff. And There's different dogmas that tell us how to deal with things. But what I found through all of it is like, actually, the way you deal with things is you confront them, you face them, and you don't. The last thing you do is you hide or you run or you pacify and that's a big part of the electronic music, psychedelia, spiritual culture, not by choice, but as just a byproduct of where there's blind spots, which is like, you can become arrogant, you can become egoic, you can think you have all the answers. Just like the Jedi in Star Wars, like they thought they were ultimate light and they had all the answers, but look, they got defeated by like one guy, right? They defeated the whole side of light in that movie. Some people don't even know Star Wars. I've been watching Star Wars lately. It's pretty cool. Like the animated series. But with that, sorry, go ahead, Nick.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I can relate fully to that. As someone who also meditates, like twice daily, like the impact on my life has been incalculable. And I've definitely, feel like I'm cultivating a connection with source, quote unquote. But it is very easy for this new iteration of the ego that is now like kind of supercharged in a way, because now it's plugged in to this other thing, and it starts to think like, oh, that person, these people are like low vibration. They're not on my level. Like, they're not awake. So I can totally relate on how easy it is to kind of fall into like egoic traps, even having kind of, developed a spiritual, connection.
What's more spiritual than a big ego, right? I mean, it's like, it's the thing that is needed to be a strong leader, in a sense, that has a identity and a persona and is magnetizing and attracts people and is appealing in a kind of like subtle human evolutionary way. But it's the same thing that's also super polarizing and pushes people away and is scary and intimidating and could become aggressive and could become violent and is all about like the choice between, do you go towards the light side or the dark side? Which beast do you feed? And electronic music and music in general is a very ego-centered industry, in the sense that
I guess entertainment in general.
The thing about electronic music is so much of the scene is about like people enjoying and having love and the experience between the DJ and the audience. But I guess what I'm trying to speak to is like, everyone knows that DJ or those DJs that are just totally like all about the lifestyle. And you also hear it in the quality of the type of music that they're about, and what their culture that they cultivate is about, versus other people who are like, they live it, they breathe it.
Yeah, well, some people want to provide an experience for their audience, and others just want to throw cake at them.
Right. Exactly. So it's like, if you want to be humble, if you want to make good work that people resonate with, that continues to evolve, in my estimation, it's like, seek compassion and being humble and keeping grounded and remembering the roots of where you came from and what it did for you. Because when you stop working from that space, then you're just working from a place of like, hitting deadlines and goals and making stuff that's like mechanical and predictable. And to each his own. If that's the life someone chooses, fine. But for me personally, the life that I want to live with this type of art form is one in which it never stops evolving, and I just keep seeing where and how far I can take it. And so far, it's been kind of like nothing short of miraculous what I've received from people doing my set. I was doing like 6 sessions a month, group events, for the last 10 years, pretty much. I've been at, I'm at Hollywood Roosevelt right now, and different private clubs. I have studios like Den Meditation, Unplugged, festivals. I headlined Lightning in a Bottle a couple of years ago on the Lightning stage.
Awesome! And then you did Long Beach Love Festival.
Long Beach
recently,
Love Festival, right? I was doing stuff at Wisdom for a couple of years. So the reason I even mention all this is it's been amazing, and I've taken it out of just a little tent sound healing stage or just my studio and like seen, where can I take this? How can I apply this? And all the different areas and avenues. The feedback has just been nothing short of incredible. So it's kind of an affirmation for me, like, just keep doing it and keep going. And also a message for anyone who's following their passion. And in this case, like electronic music producers, that it's such an incredible task and role and art form, because you can really put so much of your own flavor and unique quality into your production, and you can tap in and bring out a quality that you feel that's unique, and kind of like encapsulate it into a production that's shared with people, and remixed or applied spatially in a virtual world. Like, the future of people making and expressing electronic music, I think, is just now entering into this, it's like next phase,
right?
Like what it could become. And that's an exciting time. And I think a lot of people are going to find that there's going to be new avenues for where the music can evolve and how it can evolve. And
so actually to that point, you know, I guess it seems to me your focus is kind of, you know, going person to person, I guess, and performing for people and kind of letting your work be shared that way. But have you ever considered, you know, releasing your stuff as tracks that like DJs could then, you know, purchase and play, and, you know, with a record label or something like that? Because I remember listening to one of your live streams during the pandemic, and be like, holy shit, like if I could buy this as a record and then play it at the next party that I DJ at, like I would 100% do so.
Yeah, and people have asked me all the time. My issue with it is I haven't put out too much of my like long hour stream sound healing stuff, because I've just been burned, you know. I've had stories where people will download the track when they're not supposed to or even able to. They'll get like a third party download going, and then I'll hear from other people like, hey, this dude put on a mushroom ceremony and he played your stuff because I know it's your stuff. And he charged everyone like $1,000, and he told them that they were going to have this mystical experience, and they totally went on this journey. And I thought it was your stuff, but I'm not quite sure.
It's like you're bringing them on the journey.
It's like, wow. So that guy just basically like is pretending to be me in a sense. Right. And for that, and the way I record and produce these experiences, they're so point specific to like where it's happening, who's there, time of day. It's just something I feel into when I'm working, is like all these factors, right? So and I like to create original experiences for people. And that's a part of also what I think is interesting about what I do, is it's pretty much 100% live all the time. And what you're hearing and experiencing kind of dissolves into the ether, and you can come again next week, but it's going to be its own journey. Right. And there's something that I like about that, right? So when someone takes a recording that's only there for playback, for individual use, for people, you know, or just as a promotional thing, and then they use it for their own experience, and in some cases monetize it, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of like, so what I'm working on is kind of a home where people can access my body of work, like an app, if you will. And once people are a part of that and they want to support it, and they're down to be a part of that group, that concept, that subscription, which is one-to-one relationship with me, then that's how I can give them access to everything. That's how I can do like live sessions for them through the app, right? So that's my next step, is working on exactly that thing. There's a huge demand from like a lot of people in my network that want me to do that. So that's kind of the next big step for me.
Got it. You know, I can definitely see that as well. Sort of, a proprietary platform that's like your direct relationship with the consumer.
That's what I'd like to do.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to do. And then I'll put some stuff on Spotify.
Got it.
You know what I'm saying? Because then it's like I haven't really put anything there, and people are like, "You're missing out. You're missing out." Actually, I don't feel like I am, because I'm doing okay with my physical events,
right?
And I'm doing them at the level that I feel like really good with right now, like really awesome places with great partnerships. And I really, really, really enjoy the physical experience. So in turn, it's really building like my audience, my following, you know, and people who really, really support me and want to see what's next. So the next evolution from there is just a proprietary app, one-stop shop. So
got it.
For me, it's like, it's just a natural flow. It's the next step. And it's an exciting step, actually.
No, 100%. In terms of your lane, I think that makes perfect sense. I think for me, just in terms of, you know, as a DJ, I'm like, oh man, I would just love to be able to own these records. because some of the tunes are like just hot.
So I think you're speaking to like my electronic music productions,
Yeah.
versus my sound healing ambient
Right,
stuff, which I call Quantum Harmonix.
Got it.
I don't really refer to my electronic music as Quantum Harmonix.
Got it.
Although it leverages a lot of the principles I've learned from what I call Quantum Harmonix. And you're totally right. I will be putting more stuff out, actually. I have a lot of unreleased recordings. And I think what you tuned into at Wisdom, a lot of that was like just my live electronic stuff, which is also layered and like performed live in real time with all the parts split up. And, you know, I'm bringing in the kick and the snare, or taking out the cymbals and the synth part too. And it's kind of a fun way to work, actually, because you throw caution to the wind and you're using all your, you know, your layers in real time and breaking down the track and evolving it as it sees fit. And I like that.
You're right, yeah, because there are sort of two sides to what you do. There's like the more direct kind of healing stuff, and then kind of
I call it like the solar and lunar.
Okay.
Right? So one's active, one's passive. One's dynamic in the sense that it's like external, and one's internal. So
Got it. Well, I will say you are a legit electronic producer, and I feel like a lot of those tracks, you know, deserve to be like out there.
Thanks,
for
man.
DJs. So.
Yeah, it's some of my favorite work, and also some of like the people like love some of these tracks, and they haven't been released, but I'm going to actually very, very soon, because I've recorded a lot of them, and I'm finally, everything's kind of coming together where I'm like, okay, time to start putting out some of these tracks. I also have a side project called Solar Theory with another sound healer. We have some unreleased tracks coming out soon, so I'm excited, because it's like I have stuff to look forward to putting out that's already recorded, really. So stay tuned, I'd say.
Okay. And then, yeah, what does the sound healer community look like? So before we started rolling, you mentioned that kind of in the visual, like VJ community, it's kind of a small community, and, you know, it can be competitive. Is it the same way in terms of sound healing? I mean, I think you're the only one that I know of that's kind of using electronic components. But there are a handful of other guys I've seen around town that do a lot of the singing bowls.
This whole thing really blew up like in the last 3-4 years, because you can buy bowls anywhere. And there's websites now, and they're ornate, and there's like teacher training programs, and there's a huge movement towards this. So you see a lot more people doing sound healing, and at the same time, it reinforces this idea of what a sound healer is, or what a sound bath is. But as I mentioned, like I started doing this work in 2010, 2011. Before I even knew there was a group or a culture around it. It was just like a natural evolution for my meditation that I was sharing with people too. And so in doing so, I never really modeled my work after what I thought it should look like. And I think that's what a lot of people today who want to get into it, they go, okay, I need my shakers, I need my 7 chakra sound healing bowl set, I need at least 1 or 2 gongs, I need wind chimes, and then and a shamanic feather thing, and some Palo Santo. Then I'm a sound healer. Then I can get booked and do my thing. And a lot of times these people come in. I'm like, oh, you came to my event 3 months ago. I know that guy. Well, now they're a shamanic sound healer, and they have like the whole set. And you see that they're on their Facebook. They're like, shamanic sound bath event, whatever, you know, rooftop, Hollywood, whatever, $85 tickets, and you're like, man, I was doing community like $20 tickets for at least 3 years before I even went up to 25. And even then I was like, I feel bad going charging 25, you know? And these and they come in, it's like super elite premium, almost sold out, $85. Get it in advance and get your, you know, whatever tote bag. It's like, it's this,
it's kind of like a
takeover
race to cash in as quickly as possible.
And people want the limelight on them. People immediately get drawn to like what being a sound healer, how it's perceived as like a persona, right? And for me, all I want is for people to come to my events and completely forget they're even at an event, who I am, what the hell's going on. Like, I don't need them to judge me or my life, what clothes I'm wearing, like if I'm legit or not, which degree do I have, where did I get my sound healing training, are my bowls in the right frequency? I don't need them to worry about all that. All I need them to all I need to focus on is, am I doing everything I can that they experience themselves in a deep, effortless, smooth way that goes deeper and deeper and deeper, that they almost find themselves in like such a moment of clarity where an inspiration can come through, a dead relative, a message, an emotional release, tears, because those things do happen all the time. But to get there, I have to do my job. It has nothing to do with showing up to fulfill an image.
Right.
And so I think the culture has moved so much in a direction where image sells. You know, some of the most popular sound healers online are all like, their Instagrams are just beautiful and they have a lot of like ad money and they have all the right tools and it's like that sells, you know? So is there competition? Sure. There's people in the last 10 years that I know that started from nothing just like I did. And some of them are still doing stuff at studios. Other people have relationships with big companies. Other people are making, you know, some people are making a lot of money a month with their online programs. So it's a range of stuff. But all in all, it's the meditation and sound healing community, specifically, I should speak to like LA, is not absolved of the same kind of like egoic drive behind other industries in LA as well, entertainment in general. And that just has to do with survival. There's so many people, there's only so many studios, and you want to get out there, and you also don't want to get confused for being someone else.
Right.
And I didn't have to worry about that because I'm the guy with the synths.
Right.
And they're blue. And you remember they're blue, and there's two of them. And hey, that's the guy with the two blue synths who does the sound healing thing. So like that's been my image.
Right, yeah. You're like the electronic sound healing
It's
guy.
come with it. It's a double-edged sword, you know. I've done stuff in like Ventura County and Santa Barbara where you'll get like, you know,
But they're like, where are the bowls?
they'll come in, they'll be like older hippie women and be like, I like the bowls. Like, what is this DJ thing? And I'm like putting my PA on my subs, you know, I'm like setting up my amp and my mixer, and they're like, what is this DJ shit? I'm like, oh, I totally get it. Just try it and see see what you think. You know, I think you'll like it.
Oh yeah.
And afterwards they're like, oh my God, I had no idea. I'm gonna tell Ruthie and Frank. I have to bring them back. I have to come back here. And it's like, cool. So my list of approval is like, okay, so I went to Colombia. Like shamans in Colombia liked it. Like kissing my hand, excuse me. Like shaman in Colombia liked it. Professors in CSUN were like, wow, this is a good alternative to sleep drugs. We need to do research. Corporate HR people think it's good enough for their employees. You know, older hippie women who are biased towards sound healing bowls and gongs, who judged it as some DJ stuff, are like, wow, that was amazing. So over time, I got confident in the sense that I'm like, okay, as much as I think what I'm doing is electronic and alien and out there and like synthy and maybe it's too atmospheric and too much for them. Like on the flip side of that, the response was like, that was a lot more natural than I thought it'd be. That was a deeper and more like foundational in where it took me than I thought it would originally. And I think that's interesting feedback to receive.
Yeah, and on the flip side, you have someone like me who will see you at the domes, and I'm like, oh, this is some DJ shit.
Exactly.
And I'm getting like healing out of it.
Yeah, which is cool because I don't have any DJ equipment and I have no like mixer between my synths, and it's literally all like by ear, right? So I'll just like tap play on both of them and I'll BPM sync, and it's just layering, you know, some pre-layered rhythms or synths or chord progressions, and it all exists in my mind. So there's no real like save file anywhere per se, other than like the arrangement of the parts. How it's performed and assembled is like through memory.
All right, so, you know, we're coming up on time here, but I did want to kind of ask you with our last few moments about your trajectory in terms of becoming, you know, a pretty well-known sound healer. You know, in terms of the DJs I interview, there's always kind of a very similar storyline, which was, you know, they went to a bunch of parties, they made friends with a promoter, they got an opening gig, and it kind of grew from there. And I was wondering if you could kind of talk about how it was for you.
Yeah, totally. So I did mention like my first Burning Man was 2010, and I didn't really know anybody, the DJs or the communities or anything. But there was a lot of people I connected with there, and it wasn't until like 2 years later when I came back from Iowa back to LA for a summer break. I was gonna go back and finish my studies there, but within 2 weeks, I went to like a random psytrance festival that some friends invited me to, right, in Apple Valley. And It was called Indigo Vortex, actually. It was really, really memorable. Well, this random breathwork dude came, and he was mid-40s, early 40s. He's like, big built, shamanic type character. But he felt like this guy knows his stuff, right? He was going to do a breathworks ceremony type experience. And there was 30 of us, and I overheard everyone was like, wow, that's Michael Brian Baker. I cried last time, and he's amazing. So I was like, who's this guy? So I did the experience, and it was really, really something. Like the intensity of the breath, what it did to me, how I felt after. So I just approached him. I was like, hey, if you ever need sound for your experiences, let me know. And within a week and a half, he reached out to me, and he's like, hey, I'm going to go to this Bhakti Fest yoga festival. I'm going to do a breath work for 350 people in a room. Do you want to tag along? I have tickets for you. And I was like, I'm down. So really that invitation was kind of within just being back in LA for a couple of weeks, immediately put me in an environment where there was a bunch of people. They were in the right space. They were getting ready to breathe. They were breathing, and then they were done breathing. And my sounds were there gluing it and holding it. It had its place there, right? And right after the event, I went to the tent that's outside where it was like our HQ. And he told me, he's like, if you want to do private sessions, you can use the tent. He didn't do any private sessions the whole weekend. He was like talking to people. But I did like 8 private sessions.
Okay.
After this workshop, just people started lining up. They're like, please put me down and give me an hour. I would lie them down, and I had these 2 like kind of like cheapo computer speakers at the time, but it didn't matter because they were low volume anyway. I just needed something to carry the sound, and I had like a sub under the table. And a few of the women, one of them emailed me a week after, and she's like, wow, I've been sleeping incredibly. I've been having sleep issues, and since your session, like, I can't believe it. It's been amazing. Please don't go back to Iowa. Like, you need to stay here. And a few other people also reached out. That was a deciding factor. I was like, you know what? I'm going to just keep doing that. If it was almost like a fractal. If this exists here on this level, and I did those private sessions, and I'm able to find my niche and where there's like this health and wellness component to this, and this meditative effect to this, pain management, there's like so much going on here, and I'm performing my synth work, which I had been doing for like 6-7 years at that point, right? So it was just so ingrained in me. Like, this, I got to do this. So that event, that summer 2012, was a really, I think, pivotal moment for where I was going to take it, and kind of help familiarize the community with my line of work before it was too defined per se by what sound healing is, right? Kind of, I was right there at that right time, as also a lot of offshoot festivals started to come online too.
Right.
You had like Lucidity Festival, and
Right.
LIB started getting really big between 2012 and 2017. And so I kind of came in right at that wave where people understood like, oh, electronic music, synth, ambient, zone, like, let's do it, and it was through that consistency that I was able to just keep showing up, keep finding more and more people who had experienced my work or never experienced it. And that consistency really for like 4 or 5 years, which eventually gave me a portfolio of like media and history and albums and releases and other stuff that just kept me moving forward, right? So in retrospect, I guess the key was like, I found my home and what I was like supposed to do, really point specific with what I do and the way I do it. And I found like a consistency around how to share that experience. And I think as long as you find that, like, you're going to succeed at whatever you're doing. You just got to have a way to keep doing it.
Got it. Yeah, I guess in part because you have such a very specific lane, it sort of made it easier for you to kind of ride that path, right? Because I think with DJs, everyone wants to be a DJ, so it's kind of like people are scratching and clawing for the gigs. But because what you do is so unique, it seems as though people would be a lot more receptive to
Totally. And it's been fun to help pave forward what sound healing is, or what that kind of experience could be. And then having the music overtly be about like DJs, let's be honest, like DJs, it's all about feeling better and a lifestyle and a culture that's about feeling your best. But they don't always overtly come out and say that. That's not always the branding of a DJ. There's like other things there.
Yeah, there's a hedonism. Like people are coming to kind of have an experience. Maybe it's spiritual, maybe it's not, but there is kind of an underlying hedonism. Whereas kind of with you, I think the emphasis on healing maybe is more front and center.
It's not about me and what I'm doing and how I'm performing. And I don't want you to clap after, and I don't want you to acknowledge that session as me having a really good delivery technically.
Right.
Instead, I want to use all the technical chops I have and like how I've systematized Quantum Harmonix and like how it's its own self-contained body of work that generates this like effect, right? And I want that to bring people to a state where that's the value. It's like their inward trajectory.
Right.
And I guess that's also the difference between most electronic being rhythmic and about the beat and about connecting you to that primal like life force of the rhythm. Whereas I feel like ambient or sound healing music is absent of that kind of rhythm, absent of that beat, and instead is more of it's almost a brain consciousness type experience instead of a body and like movement experience.
Yes, it's almost like for you, it's like kind of the being of service part to it of what you do is more kind of front and center.
Absolutely. I've been grateful to work with a range of people: cancer patients, children with learning disabilities, people with severe pain. I'm working with a cancer patient right now, actually, veterans. So it's worked on all of them. Like every one of those cases, there's been people who are like, my condition is better now than before, right? And it's for me, it's kind of like, it's both surprising, like, wow, why isn't this more of a thing? But it's also not surprising at all because, of course, you feel better. You know, so much of, I think, our approach and our methods, they miss the mark on like really how easy or basic it is to just subtly shift like your state of being and how that can affect the release of certain hormones, cortisol levels, stress levels, your nervous system responds, fight or flight, right? If you can directly interface with the body in this way consistently, then you can, in essence, trick the biochemistry. You can regulate overactive mind, which in itself is a frequency, right? Because your brain is oscillating. It's the left and right hemispheres are like, it's rhythmic, but sometimes it's too fast, you know, or sometimes it's just really slow and you can't keep up. But what listening to sound does is it kind of shakes things up in a sense where your brain has to harmonize with the principles of the music. The way I write the music is there's universal principles that I would apply to them, like the tempo counts, the beats per minute, type of delays, what type of, is it a saw wave? Is it a sine wave? What type of synth? How are you using a filter? Is there a low frequency oscillation modulating, or is it just a standing wave, right? Is it breathing? Is it not breathing? These are all qualities. And a synth can carry, and it's incredible what a synthesizer can do through, you know, basic just oscillators and filters, and you can shape and move and form the sound. That's why it was so novel when synthesizers first started becoming prominent, because it was like, wow, this is the future. It's almost like a Star Trek device. You can make any device come from this teleporter. You can a fabricator, right? It's almost like the fabricator of vibration.
Or the replicator.
Replicator, excuse me. And so that's a very, very appealing idea. And what's ultimately happening there is you're telling a story. And some of the most basic stories are the most powerful ones. Like the sun rises, then the sun comes down, the end. Literally, you can start a scene with like the sun rising and say like the title of the film. And then there could be a body or there could not be a body, but the next scene could literally be the sun going down and it could say the end.
Right.
And
that's the full story.
You could straight up say that was a story right there. It's like the most basic story, but it fit all the criteria required, right? For you to have an experience of movement.
Right.
And so in the same sense, you can tell a story through sound, and it could be as basic as like a thing is happening and a thing's not happening anymore.
Right.
And now it's starting to happen again. And through that, we almost have it's almost like a language in the sense that we understand that narrative, and then we connect with it in a way that's so deep and unexplainable that I don't think we can quite pinpoint or put our finger on what's happening there. But that's why electronic music's amazing, because it's like the ultimate storytelling has no words and no visuals, but it's like it's building. It's like beat drops. It's like, whoa, it's like a scene of a movie, or it's like a scene in your life.
Yeah, every night out is kind of like its own narrative. But with that, man, I think our story is coming to an end. We have reached time, but why don't you tell everyone where they can find you on the socials and where you'll be performing in the next couple weeks?
For sure. Thanks for having me and
yes,
giving me
of course,
a chance
thank
to
you so
share
much.
about quantum harmonics and meditation, all the stuff that we've gone over today. I only think it's the beginning for a lot of this stuff. People can find me at Quantum Harmonix with an X, or Torkom Ji, Torkomji. And also, I have a side project, Visual Reality. So me and a visual artist, Mike Strauss, we put on like these visual sound bath events, we call them. We're also integrating a lot of VR and other tech to some of these things. So super exciting. You can follow me on all those
Fantastic.
places.
So Instagram, Facebook.
Yep,
okay.
all the same.
Okay.
Yep.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, man. I feel like we've touched on a lot of really interesting topics that are, rave adjacent, but also very true to my heart in terms of healing and spirituality and wellness. And thank you again so much for
Awesome,
coming.
man. Thanks
and
for having
sharing
me.
about it.
I appreciate it.
Awesome. All right, guys, until next week.